Welcome to the third annual Neuroanatomy Spelling Bee. Let's meet our contestants. In contestant number 1, we have Justin. Contestant number 2, Spencer. And contestant number 3, Torin.
That's my kid! Oh, Torin!
Okay, contestant number 1, we have Justin.
Boo.
Your word is spinothalamic.
Spinothalamic. F-U-T-B-O-L. Spinothalamic.
Did you just spell football?
No, I spelled spinothalamic.
That's incorrect.
Okay.
Have a seat.
Full ride.
Next up is contestant number 2, Spencer, our reigning champion for the past 2 Neuroanatomy Spelling Bees. I see you wore your medals.
I do every day.
Your word is raphenuclei.
Raphenuclei. R-A-L-P-H-E-N-U-C-L-E-I. Raphenuclei.
I believe you spelled Ralph nuclei. That's incorrect.
What?
Take a brief intermission. Our third contestant is Torin.
You got this, baby! Just like we practiced.
Man. Quite done. Your word is parenchymal.
Parenchymal? Okay. P-A-R-E-N C-H-Y M-A L. Parenchymal.
That's correct.
Yeah, Torin!
Congratulations, Torin.
As the contestant watches the judge asked to spell the next word, their supplementary motor and motor areas are used to orient their eyes to the judge's lips. The contestant sees the judge via the visual pathway. The judge's image appears first through the cornea, pupil, and then the retina of the eye. The image from the retina is sent to the optic nerve, then the optic chiasm, to the optic tract, and to the lateral geniculate nucleus. The lateral geniculate nucleus sends this signal to the primary visual cortex of the occipital lobe, which discriminates size, texture, and shape, and the visual association cortex, which discriminates color and motion of the judge's lips as they speak. This also allows the contestants to recognize the judge's face and who she is. The signal is then sent to the action stream, which is dorsal and detects movement, and the perception stream, which recognizes objects such as the judge. The contestant may have recognized the judge via the retrieval portion of the declarative memory from the hippocampus. When the word is heard by the contestant, the signal travels through the vestibulocochlear nerve. It travels up the brainstem through the medulla pons and midbrain. The cochlear nuclei in the medulla relays auditory information to the superior olivary nucleus. The superior olivary nucleus is where the sound location is identified from inputs in each ear. Next, this transmission travels through the lateral lemniscus to the inferior colliculus in the midbrain and is where signal integration, frequency recognition, and pitch discrimination occur. This signal then travels to the medial geniculate body in the thalamus, where the spoken word is identified and the identity and gender of the judge is processed. The medial geniculate body also acts as a relay station, transmitting the signal to the primary auditory cortex, which is then responsible for auditory discrimination. This allows the contestants to recognize, compare, and separate sounds. The sound then travels to the secondary auditory cortex, where the sound is classified as language, music, or other sounds. In this case, the sound would be interpreted as speech and language. In Wernicke's area, auditory comprehension and vocabulary is interpreted. The signal then connects to the limbic areas via long association fibers. The amygdala plays a role as well, connecting the word heard to the contestant's emotion. It is sensitive to sound with valence or meaning. It also plays a role in fear conditioning, regulating acoustic startle response, and modulating auditory cortex plasticity. The hippocampus allows the word heard to be connected to the contestant's memory. Noise exposure affects hippocampal neurogenesis and long-term potentiation that affects structural plasticity, learning, and memory. The ventral prefrontal association cortex controls the contestant's mood toward the given word and demeanor after processing the word. The contestants decide to adjust their posture to portray an emotion. This triggers the cortical association area in the prefrontal cortex to process the decision for voluntary movement. The basal ganglia takes the brakes off of the motor thalamus, allowing for voluntary movement. This track begins in the motor thalamus, moves to the motor cortex, and sends a signal via the upper motor neuron through the cortical spinal tract, synapsing with the lower motor neuron, which activates voluntary movement. The basal ganglia also takes the brakes off of the pedunculopontine nucleus, which is an inhibitory circuit. This allows the postural and girdle muscles to move smoothly. This circuit begins in the ventrolateral pedunculopontine nucleus, sending the signal through the upper motor neuron via the reticulospinal tract, synapsing with the lower motor neuron, inhibiting the girdle and postural muscles. The vestibulocerebellum is activated to keep the contestant upright and oriented during the shift of their center of gravity. Information about the head's position relative to gravity is received by the semicircular canals in the otolithic organs. The signal is sent to the vestibular nuclei in the medulla and the pons, which is sent to the follicular nodular node of the cerebellum. In this case, Justin shifts his weight to his right side, showing that he does not care much about the competition. In Spencer's case, he stands up a little bit taller, showing confidence in the word he is given. And in Torrance' case, he slouches forward, showing he is nervous. Our contestants at this point have already processed the word that they need to spell and have had a slight reaction to what they have heard. The signal has been transferred from Wernicke's area to Broca's area via the arcuate fasciculus. The premotor and motor cortices control planning and producing of muscle movements necessary for speech. The area adjacent to Broca's controls the tone of voice that the contestants use when speaking, but a large part of this task was generated by Broca's area, when the contestant was planning each letter that they needed to speak and in the correct order. The cerebellum helps to control the opening and closing of the mouth, specifically while contestants were speaking. For some more details along the way, cranial nerve 10 controls the larynx and the soft palate, which help the contestant generate the sounds planned out in the Broca's area. And the nucleus ambiguus also contributed to speaking by innervating multiple facial muscles in the soft palate, larynx, pharynx, and upper esophagus. Cranial nerves 7, 5, and 12 control movements of the lips, jaw, and tongue. These cranial nerves also correspond with certain cranial nerve nuclei in the brainstem, such as the facial nucleus, which contains cell bodies of the facial nerve, and the trigeminal motor nucleus, which contains cell bodies that innervate all muscles coming from the first pharyngeal arch, and the hypoglossal nucleus, which contains cell bodies that innervates the muscles of the tongue. Sensory information of the lips and tongue are also necessary for speech via sensory homunculus and the primary somatosensory cortices using visuolingual perception. Note that all of these descriptions will vary from contestant to contestant.
strong.